Hey Lloyd, I'm ready to be heartbroken. These were the words of Glasgow indie pop darling Tracy Ann Campbell on the 2006 Camera Obscura single of the same name, but they were certainly not the words of hirsute Greenock Morton captain Grant Gillespie when his side's late equaliser was chalked off by the referee, who couldn't let a brutal assault on Josh Ray go unpunished. It was a real case of Lloyd Wilson and the commotions at Capo yesterday, with the scant amount of football on show overshadowed by the performance of the man in the middle, whose overzealous interventions took up the bulk of the post-match interviews. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. I am Duncan Cameron, and joining me tonight to see if we can find something other than the referee to discuss, it is Robbie Weir, first of all. How are you, Robbie?
Yeah, I'm very good. Had a good weekend, actually. We, on Friday, of course, myself, Blair and John Greer formed the Bold and the Beautiful, as John was so insistently calling us, for the Macmillan Lounge, the Stevie Gray, who I was getting berated off of as well for the pre-match podcast for this one being too short. Inconveniencing him at work, and he was just after a name check, so hopefully this placates him. But yeah, he was hosted a quiz up in the Macmillan Lounge. Really good night, good laugh, and yeah, we ended up finishing second place despite certain team members, maybe yourself and maybe John Greer as well, leaving early doors. Completely understandable given the circumstances, albeit John did join us on the phone, much to the annoyance of every other team, for the Rovers round, where we got the club's historian chipping in, shall we say.
Yeah, I think phoning in the club historian, especially given that there was a Rovers round still to come, is probably not within kind of regular quiz etiquette. But given half your team has literally walked out, I think you could be forgiven for that. And we've also got Leslie Mabe on tonight as well. How are you, Les?
One. Richard Finn is not with us because he's on Malaysian international duty, but I'm very glad to be back on with you guys today. I think, for those of you that were at the quiz on Friday night, I understand there was some concern that I might have contributed some questions. I did contribute some to the volunteering day earlier in the year, including piloting one of the Should McStay or Should Dargoes from previous episodes, which did not go down well, involving a certain ginger-haired right-back. But no, I'm very, very happy to be on, and looking forward to discussing what we can about yesterday's game.
So it's a run that may well come to an end, but Barry Robson fielded the same side for the fourth game on the spin. Les, were you surprised by that in light of last week's loss at Firhill?
I was certainly surprised by us going with exactly the same lineup. Right? You guys talked about it in the pre-match for the Morton game. You know, when you've had a defeat, it does give you a license to change things up, particularly with guys like Jack Hamilton, who you think there might have been a reason for him not starting the first however many games in the season, given that he'd had surgery and things over the summer, and you thought that might have been one change that I might have expected to come back in. I was very surprised actually to see us starting with no recognised forwards, I have to say. And it's the kind of thing you think, if we're up against a team like Ayr or a team like potentially St Johnstone, where we know we might expect them to have a lot of the ball going with that formation that allows us to press and hit people on the break, you can see the logic there. I was a bit surprised to see us setting up like that with respect to play a team like Morton, who are probably very closely matched ourselves. I thought we might have taken the handbrake off a bit. So I saw the team line coming, and I kind of thought, that's a bit regressive. He's setting us up to draw away from home. He's setting us up to finish mid-table. But then I think what you always have to temper that with, and as we'll come on to saying later, is he's got the results by and large since he came in. He's made some team decisions that have been not popular, that you've thought, nah, and more often than not, they've been the right decisions. Conversely, when Robson has done things that we all want, we've ended up hemorrhaging goals at the other end. So, yeah, I won't lie, I was underwhelmed. And again, as I've said quite a bit, it's one of these team lines where you think he's making a rod for his own back here, because if we go there and we don't win, people are going to be like, oh, why has he no started Lewis Vaughan? Why have we got a centre forward on the bench when we've got a wee guy sprinting about up front who can't shoot on target? But, he's earned the right, I think, to make these calls. So, yeah, I was underwhelmed, I won't lie, but I could see where he was potentially coming from.
It's very much a case that the end justifies the means. Like that's always the case, and I think we'll kind of recognise that. It's what you said there about making a rod for his own back. Barry Robson's just so much respect for this because he writes the attack lines for if we get beat in the way that he sets these teams out. And the most obvious one with this. So he says immediately, first thing he says in his post-match after the game is, we had a fair idea what this game was going to look like today, so we decided to go more direct. Making that decision to go more direct, but not choosing to play Jack Hamilton at the same time, it's almost like that's not your default. He's actively making a choice that, on the face of it, to idiots like me, doesn't make much sense. Because again, if we'd get beat and he'd come out and said, "Oh no, we thought we'd go more direct today," but he didn't play Jack Hamilton, everybody would be saying, well, why not? That's 1-1. That just makes perfect sense. But it's totally, as he deserves so much credit for this. Because it's easy to do the obvious things. It's easy to do the things that people expect and the things that people won't criticise you for if it goes wrong. So it's interesting that he's chosen to stick to that team again because, Robbie, although, again, the obvious thing to say, that it's true for one thing, is he's put out the same 11 for 4 games on the bounce, but actually a fair bit of tactical kind of flexibility in this. It wouldn't be fair to say that Barry Robson's entirely kind of rigid.
To a degree, I feel like the narrative around Barry Robson's obviously that he's quite rigid with the way that he is, but I don't know how much of it was by design or by whether it was some weird inside knowledge that we had just had. But I don't think anyone, I know Davey Hancock said it on Raith TV, but talking about a sunny Capello, which is a very, very rare thing to be discussing, but you see how sticky that pitch was, and it almost like we played the circumstances. Sometimes you talk about going up to a game like Arbroath away in December, we played the circumstances, and you're like, well, yeah, you're going to try and do that. You get the wind behind your back for a second half and you can potentially bombard their goal, etc. I've seen it before. Again, I remember a game distinctly at Cowdenbeath where Ryan Conroy scored a free kick from about 40 yards because we played the circumstances. Nobody does that on a sunny day at Capello because what else are you meant to do? But the pitch was definitely a factor. Morton was trying to zip it about on the deck and it was getting caught, whereas we were doing the opposite. And we've spoken before about, we've definitely mentioned about the ability of being able to change it up with the personnel that we've got in our squad, particularly the forward options. Paul McMullen, we know certainly that while he's yet to get off the score sheet, definitely brings a chaos factor. So it's kind of just sticking with that. I know that we'd sort of said it before with the pre-match podcast where we'd spoken about their back line and Blair was asking the question about who the personnel are. And Jackson Longridge stood out very, very distinctly as being not a centre-back.
Sponsors man of the match, Jackson Longridge, to you.
To much mirth in the stands, apparently. To much bemusement. But yeah, look, I think with that one, you've got to give Barry Robson a degree of credit. You can see why people are maybe sitting on the more cynical side, but ultimately, look, a lot of the talk before the game is about, like, if we win this, how does our run then look? And obviously, you go from winning all those games. And it's much the same for Morton, because even Blair mentions it. You look at how it goes from suddenly 4 games without a loss to 5 games without a win. These things change very, very quickly. And he stuck to his guns, and it's paid off, really, ultimately, albeit in a game that had very, very few sort of opportunities rather than talking points, I think is safe to say.
Yeah. So as someone who's just compiled all the notes for a discussion, very few talking points. And I have to, the first thing I've got written down is exactly the one you've just mentioned there, which, I mean, how many times on this podcast do we get into talking about the grass? And that's pretty far low down. Even with our groundskeeping expert on staff, we still don't really get into talking about the playing surface very often. But it's not just us. Both managers, this is the first thing they mention in their post-match, is to say that the park is really sticky, really slow. And it's actually, it was very apparent live, but it's really apparent that sort of the first kind of chance in the highlights, it's the Jordan Doherty kind of chips it into the channel for Scott Brown, who squares it across. Dylan Easton actually gets a really good contact on it, but it's right at James Storer.
Yeah.
In fact, it definitely is. In his post-match, Dougie Imrie refers to him as Jimmy. And I was like, who's Jimmy? I get many, I'm assuming, 19-year-old English guys called Jimmy. I don't know if he's English, don't know if he's 19. Where was I going with that? Yes, sorry. So in the build-up to that move, so that's about it for chances in the first half. But before it gets to Jordan Doherty, as the players are just kind of knocking it around the back line, you can really see just how bad the park is for the ball moving on it. And again, both managers say it looks great. Like there's nothing wrong with it. It's not been kind of poorly maintained. It's just so dry. They don't have sprinklers. And the interesting thing is that's where they kind of diverge. But they both make the same point, which is that Robson says, we changed it up. And I'd be really interested to know at what point they made that decision. Because he talks about the fact that for the goal, obviously we'll get to, it was something that they'd worked on. We're just kind of putting the ball over the top of that Morton defence and trying to turn them. But was it someone early in the week watching highlights from previous games and going, that pitch looks pretty slow? Or was it a case of, they turned up for the warm-up and then were like, actually, Ken, something, don't worry about knocking it about. Let's just go a little bit more direct. And maybe that would then explain why he's not played Jack Hamilton. Maybe the lineup was already set. They'd worked on it all week, and then it was just a bit of a tweak. But Dougie Imrie didn't do that, and I think this is where I think it almost sticks in his craw a wee bit as he's talking about it, where he's like, I probably should have seen this coming. Because Morton doing that really annoying, sort of redundant way of playing it out from the back, where you start off with like 3 10-yard passes and then just shell it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But on a park like that, your 3 10-yard passes are just risks. And they got away with it in terms of none of that directly contributed to a goal or even really a chance. But I think it stopped them getting a foothold in the game as much as anything, because the Rovers were, whilst they never really, I don't think anybody is going to argue the Rovers played well yesterday, they were comfortable at their job, if you know what I mean. Whereas Morton just seemed a little bit like they were struggling to get to grips because what they were trying wasn't working. And I think that's probably about the difference in the game as much as anything. Not to sound like I'm wrapping up 2 minutes in, but I really don't have much else to cover in this.
He's going to be fuming if we wrap it up after what? 12 minutes? 13 minutes?
Yeah, a lot of that just...
One thing I will say though, is on that, and looking at Morton and, as you say, they were trying to play out from the back and then just failing it. I don't think you can underestimate the role of having somebody like Paul McMullen in stopping them from playing out from the back. I mean, it's something we spoke about last season with Lewis Jameson, and who was not a great finisher, not a great striker, but Paul McMullen's much better, I think, in those regards, and that's by the by. But if you've got a guy who is buzzing about, if you're a centre-back or a goalkeeper, you might not know where he is, he might not be in your field of vision, but you know he's going to be closing in on you at a great rate of knots. And at some point, you're going to have to just get rid of the ball. If you don't have that, you've got the time to build it up patiently, maybe pick out a long pass. But if you've got someone like McMullen bombing about up front, who you just know is going to be closing in on you at a great speed, you're going to have to get rid of it. And as we saw Morton a few times, that involved just getting rid of it into the stand. So, I mean, I think there's a bit of credit there in putting McMullen up front, because that, to an extent, neutralised what Morton were trying to do.
It seemed to be like they were working very hard to force it out to their fullbacks, and then both fullbacks were just kind of panicking more often than not. That was where it kind of broke down. And I think the thing with that is, as you say, Paul McMullen's really, really good at that. The Rovers are really good at that this season. That's predictable. And again, I think that's probably on Morton for not either abandoning it from the outset or adapting to it relatively quickly. Right, let's see what else happened in the first half. So, Nathan Shaw had a free kick that Josh Ray tipped over the bar. That was good. Either of you get anything to say about it?
Did really, really well, Josh Ray. I think Shaw gets up and he gets it on target and it's palmed away. And yeah, just for a game that there was very little chances in, I think that's probably a difficult one as a goalkeeper, because you are then sort of forced into that sort of concentration game of making sure that you're not getting caught out by anything. Again, there'll be a talking point later on that we'll come on to about that. And yeah, he's generally, it was just a quiet day at the office for Josh Ray, aside from getting an assist and another major talking point, shall we say.
Yeah, there's also there's an overhit cross that goes by his post as well in this first half. It's not in the highlights, but it did happen, and I want to mention it because it informs some other stuff we're inevitably going to talk about. Paul McMullen was booked in the first half. He was booked for dissent, not the only one, across the course of the afternoon, for arguing about a throw-in, which I don't think he particularly cared about. I've got no idea if he was right or wrong about it, but the referee chose to book him. Lloyd Wilson he's going to get a lot of airtime in this episode. I think it's an example of really poor refereeing where, and listen, I don't know exactly what happened. Maybe Paul McMullen used some naughty words or something. Maybe the linesman was upset, but it didn't kind of look like it. You feel like a lot of bookings for dissent, you can see it, and you kind of do that little intake of breath where you're like, yeah, that's a booking. From 80 yards away, I'm pretty sure you should be booked for what you said there.
The career of Ian Davidson, right?
Exactly. Whereas when it's just a case of like, he's complaining about, I say this all the time, but I really think when it comes to dissent, I think the referee should be factoring in, is there a reasonable grievance here? Like, rightly or wrongly, can you at least understand why he's upset? And a throw-in's a really obvious example. He's upset because he thinks he didn't get the last touch. So whether you think he's right or wrong, and between you and your linesman you think he's wrong, you can at least understand. There's a human emotion here that he thinks you were wrong. It's the easiest thing in the world to just let that go. And again, if he said something offensive, then that's maybe slightly different. But it set the tone for the rest of the game. And it was a game where nothing happened, and I think there were 9 cards.
Yeah, I mean, he was consistent with it with Grant Gillespie later on, but we'll come to that.
That's all right. It's the only thing we've got to talk about. But it's like at half-time, have I got anything else in my notes for the first half? There's a penalty shout we'll talk about in a second, sorry. But it was... It felt like a real look-at-me performance from a referee. And I don't say that often, to be honest, and I don't particularly like talking about referees as much as we do it all the time. But, like, in a game when there was nothing else going on, he managed to kind of insert himself into it, and it would have been the easiest game for there just to be nothing. But it's more so for what comes later on, but it sets the tone. I thought that booking, more than anything else, it's like, that's so easy to just not book him and just, you still have the word and you can still say, look, shut up, I've given the decision, stop arguing. I don't think you need to give him a yellow card. Right, let's get on to this penalty decision then, because you both seemed quite animated that I was going to skip over it there. So, Robbie, we'll come to you first of all. This is... Ross Matthews is kind of making moves inside the box, and he is stopped in his tracks by Ian Wilson. You believe this to be a penalty kick?
Yeah,
Chris?
I would say so. Based on the evidence of Mr. Stuart Bannigan existing last season and clattering Jamie Gullen needlessly off the ball. It's exactly the same situation. It's just not a corner. It's just the play's going on. And I don't know how it's not been flagged. But it's different referees are going to have very different opinions on these sorts of things. I'm very much just praying right now that it wasn't Lloyd Wilson during that Partick Thistle game. If someone does pull me up on that,
I can't remember who it was.
Very sorry. But there's so much discussion about the referee, and we all know what to expect. If you see Lloyd Wilson's name there, you all know that it's going to be simply going into a game. It was much the same with before, historically, looking at the likes of Crawford Allen, or of course you're talking in terms of who's the one that we used to get against Cali Thistle all the time?
Alan Muir.
Colin Stephen.
Colin
Stephen is.
Thank you very much, Leslie. I mean, the fact that you can just say that about one referee, you reference a game, and you're straight away coming in with two different responses, probably sums up the nick of refereeing in this country. It's universal for every team. That's the thing. But again, I'll return to this point later on. We're building up to a crescendo in this podcast here in terms of terrible refereeing decisions. Side note though, just want to say, absolutely hilarious to see Ian Wilson giving stick to the fans and telling them to ram it or whatever he was doing in the first half. I do enjoy
that Thistle game when Bannigan got booked, was it 3-0? Was that the game?
Yeah, it was.
Would you like to guess who the referee was?
No, I really don't. I'm in charge of the editing for this one.
It was indeed Lloyd Wilson.
Oh my word. Well, I mean, that sums it up, the inconsistency of it as well. Like the fact that he's given it for one and then not the other. But
yeah.
we move on. I'm not going to agree about it.
How do you feel about this one, this Wilson on Matthews?
So, you said he was stopped in his tracks. I would argue he wasn't stopped in his tracks. I would argue that he was manhandled to the ground from behind for stationary on the penalty spot. So I'm maybe kind of merging two different bits of the first half in my head here, but what I think happened in the build-up was McMullen gets fouled, but then the ref plays the advantage.
Yes.
Easton then has the ball, and Easton is then coming into the box. And presumably everybody's eyes then are on Dylan Easton in the box, because you know there's a good chance that he might hit the deck and you might have to make a call about there being a penalty. But Ross Matthews is there on or near the penalty spot, and if the ball gets rolled to him, he's got effectively a clean shot at goal. While this is going on, he gets banzoed to the ground by Wilson, and just goes unseen. And I think that was one of these ones where if that had been the other way around, we would have thought we've got away with one there. If that hadn't been seen, you would have thought, we were lucky there and we got away with one. So I think by the book that absolutely should have been a penalty.
Promise I'm not just disagreeing with you to create some interest, but I'm not, I don't know, I'm not that bothered with that one. I think it's so far, Matthews is so far from being involved in the game because the cross is effectively cut out. And I realise that there's nothing in the rules of the game that says that, but it's just a bit kind of nothing. Like, if Wilson doesn't touch Matthews at all there, literally nothing is any different. And I can kind of see, he's using his arms, he does kind of give him a bit of a shove. There was actually another one in the first half as well. I think it was exactly the same two players, where I think it was an overhit cross, possibly a corner, and it was kind of going out far side, kind of towards the corner of the box. And Matthews went up to to get his head on it, and Wilson kind of clattered him at that point. And I think Blair at the time thought that was a penalty, and I was like, I don't know, maybe just for this weekend I've decided I've got a higher bar for this. But I don't know, it felt incidental to me more than anything else, and just a bit like not that fussed for it. But yeah, I think when you're seeing incidents like that, kind of slowed down and given the zoomed in slow motion replay on Raith TV, you're dealing with a game that didn't have an awful lot of kind of goal mouth action in it. got to half time, and it really was a case of, that was a 45 minutes that happened. Very, very little of interest in that.
You said it in the group chat later on in the second half, and Dougie Imrie alluded to it in his interview and basically said that I got the win at half time and said it's going to be the team that makes the mistake that's going to lose this game. There's only one goal in it. Just make sure you're not that team. And they were that team.
Well, that's exactly it. That was actually, I don't think it was me. I think it was Ian who'd said it in the group chat, because the Rovers had the ball at the start of the second half. The Rovers had the ball. It gets knocked back to the feet of Josh Ray, and I thought, perfect opportunity to have a quick look at my phone. I looked at my phone, one new message, Ian Latto, going to be a mistake that settles this game. And as I looked back up again, the ball was flying over the head of the last Morton defender. In the 52nd minute, takes a big bounce. Dylan Easton, as he's famed for his aerial prowess, gets up like a salmon to nod this ball past the despairing and quite half-hearted arms of Jimmy Storer in the Morton goal. I like this goal because I get to ask my favourite question, and Robbie, I'm going to ask it to you. Who do you think is more to blame for the concession of this goal? Is it the defender, who I think is Chris Moore, or is it the goalkeeper? Or is it the option that I always give and hope nobody takes? Just an incredible forward play that couldn't be combated.
I would go with attributing the blame to Storer. I think he should be out more confidently to try and get that. And whether it's got to be with his head, or whether he can punch it away. There is simply far too much room to leave behind. I mean, ultimately, the defence themselves have got some culpability with it. When you see the goal, it just sums up football, though, that you'll see sort of clips online over the last few years, not so much now because he's just recently left, but the Man City goalkeeper, Ederson, where they all talk about the way that he uses the ball and being able to deliver these sort of trajectories out that can get it right perfectly into the path of a forward. When Raith Rovers do it, it's just a lump up the pitch from Josh Ray. I think Josh Ray deserves a lot of credit. I thought it was funny that Barry Robson was mentioning that the plan was Paul McMullen to be on the end of it rather than Dylan Easton. But look, you've got to take your wins while you get them. This is Scottish football. It's not a situation where you can really get too upset one way or the other. I think that it was very direct, but it was hyper effective. We got our goal, and then much in the same way that they did to St Johnstone last week, we basically turned to Morton. We still got out. We were still doing things. And obviously, clearly, we would want to get a second goal. But at the same time, we had that relaxation of saying, like, come and try and break us down now. You've not really created anything this afternoon. Come at us, see what you can do.
Especially given how sort of dysfunctional the entire game was. I think once you get a goal, however it comes, the temptation is always to be like, well, let's just see if the pattern of this game continues, because there's been very few chances up till now. Will that continue? And
you would think as well, I mean, if Dougie Imrie's using that in his half-time team talk, it's either going to go one way or the other. Like, you get a goal and you're thinking, right, this is it, we've done what we said. Now it's the other way. It's like, oh, fuck, they've got the goal. We're the ones that have made the mistake. Like, how do we get back into this and change it?
Yeah. Leslie, what were your thoughts on the goal?
I was thinking there that who actually made the mistake was the mid-Atlantic circulation by stabling a very strong gust from one end of Greenock to the other, which gave Josh Ray's kick extra power. But we've got a bit of a knack for players who are maybe not prolific headers of the ball, scoring goals at Greenock as a result of uncoordinated defending. So Aidan Conley got a couple the season before last down there as well. So we've taken advantage of that again. So there's something to be said for that. I did notice, like Robbie said, Robson saying in the post-match that they'd been practising it during the week with Paul McMullen. He's going to get on the score sheet one day, but I couldn't help but think if that had been Paul McMullen, the ball would have been in the sea. So it maybe was fortunate that that it was Easton. I keep sticking the boot into Paul McMullen's finishing. He's a great player, and I love him to bits. But it was maybe just the right guy in the right place at the right time, having Easton there, who was able to head it past Storer. And I think, also the fact that we're not just then starting to do what John McGlynn used to do, which is then from about the 60th minute onwards, systematically start removing forwards and midfielders and putting extra centre backs in their place. We're not being daft about things, but we're kind of trying to reasonably keep our shape, and turning the dial down a bit was pleasing to see as well.
Well, this is the big advantage of not starting with any forwards. You've got your forwards to come on. And actually, that must be really dispiriting for the opposition. You're like, we're trying to chase this game, but hang on a second, here comes Lewis Vaughan, here comes Jack Hamilton. It's that when you want to be we're just going to throw everything forward. We've got to worry about these guys now. Couple of points from me on this. Robbie, I agree with you. I think it's the goalkeeper primarily. When you see the GoPro specifically, from sort of the stanchion behind his goal, you get the best view to see his starting position. His starting position is great. It's really good. And when Josh Ray still has the ball at his feet, Storer is right central, but right on the edge of his box. And if he stays there, he's got every chance. He's going to get first contact on the ball before Easton does, almost regardless of what his defender does. And instead, as the ball's in the air, he just sort of backpedals too deep. And then as he moves across to kind of come to meet Easton, he almost looks like he's going to fall over. He's so scrappy with his own footwork. And there's the obvious point that the defender can't let it bounce, a kind of universal truth. If he just gets something on that. But there's not enough to kind of really see it. But I wonder if the defenders had a quick look, just as Ray goes to hit it, he's had a quick look, seen that his goalkeeper's on the edge of his box, and basically gone, right, if this is overhit to any degree at all, if it's going over my head, I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
And then by the time he turns round to almost just sort of follow it in, the goalkeeper's 10 yards deeper than he thought he was. It's a really good finish from Easton.
Just before we get on to the actual finish itself, because Josh Ray did similar against Dunfermline, did he not? A kick that led to a chance. So again, it's something that they're clearly focusing on, and it just adds up to the diversity of our attacks.
I think the other thing as well, we've been working on that, but more so with Paul McMullen. I think what it conjures in your mind is, training down at Starks Park, and it's just Josh Ray banging 80-yard balls for Paul McMullen to try and head into the goal first time. But if you think back to last week at Firhill, it wasn't so much Josh Ray, but there was a couple where it was Callum Fordyce kind of clipping the ball over the midfield. One for Easton, and then the second goal, it's Paul McMullen running off the last defender and kind of taking it on his chest and running through. I wonder if that's more the design they've been working on, as opposed to just the big Route 1 kind of banger. Where it is just, can you get the ball over the defence, but short of the goalkeeper? And then really that's when both Easton and McMullen can do a fair bit of damage. But yes, Easton do a lot of credit as well for that. I think it's not the typical type of chance that he gets, but he does everything right. He does exactly what he needs to do to make sure the ball ends up in the back of the net.
I'm just enjoying the notion of Callum Erskine just walking into Starks Park for the first time earlier this summer and just basically going, Robbie Thompson, no. We're scrap it all. We're not bothering with that. We're going straight to the long balls and just getting right in there. Of course, I know there's more to it than that, but yes, it's a fun notion to think about.
Right. Good. One quick thing before we get to one of the two actual kind of talking points that we've still got left. And again, I just want to highlight something that I think is bad refereeing, because that's the story of the game, really. As much as I agreed with them previously and you two didn't. There's a bit in the highlights where it ends up with sort of Paul Hanlon getting a header on inside the box that Storer kind of fairly easily gathers up. But in the build-up to this, Jack Hamilton He takes a poor first touch. He was just in the park. It might have honestly been his first touch in the entire game. And I think it's Cammy Blues is almost breaking away, albeit 30 yards from his own goal. And then Jack Hamilton just clatters into him. And it's one of the most obvious fouls you'll ever see, just in the way that he's like, I've taken a poor touch. I'm going to just go after the ball, and if somebody gets in the way, I'll foul them. And it's fine, and it's nothing else. It would never be a yellow card, maybe this referee. But he just doesn't, and he's looking right at it. He's 10 yards away.
Right.
And it's almost like he's being deliberately obtuse. Like, oh, you all think that's a foul, do you? Well, I'm the referee and I don't. I cannot think of any other explanation other than to ascribe that level of malice to his refereeing. Because it's just absolutely mad. I couldn't believe it at the time. Saw it back in the highlights. I was like, that's so funny. What are you doing? How could you not? And it gets recycled into another Rovers chance. It's if that had gone in, there would be people going absolutely tonto.
Game it didn't.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get to the other one. So the 77th minute, and we get about the fourth thing we've got to talk about, and this is the red card. So the ball's played out on the touchline into Michael Garrity. Takes a good touch to kind of take the ball away from Josh Mullen. Josh Mullen, from the very beginning of this move, has decided that he is just going to go in kind of hell for leather. It's an all or nothing one, where if Michael Garrity decides to just kind of bring the ball in and kind of hold it, or bring it in and try and go down the touchline, this is going to be a perfect tackle from Josh Mullen. But because he cuts back inside, it's a very bad tackle from Josh Mullen, who catches him late. However, to the surprise of just about everybody, Lloyd Wilson is out the traps here, like Usain Bolt with his hand in his pocket, and he's got the red card out. Now, prior to watching the highlights, my initial thought was nobody else on the ground thought that was a red card live. I'm going to upgrade that to I'm going to add two more people to it. So Zach Delaney, the Morton left back, he immediately is screaming for it, presumably screaming for a red card. And the other person, for some reason, is Jack Hamilton, who's on the other side of the park, immediately puts his head in his hands and turns away, as if he straight away has seen it and gone, that's a red card, he's going off. Nobody else thought that. And this is, obviously, I'll get the thoughts of both of you in a second, but this is one of these that, having been in the ground and seen it live, again, I think it's another one where so many times, mostly this applies to handballs actually, but so many times you see something happen in the course of a football game, and you've just, by virtue of having watched enough football, you just know what it is. You just sort of recognise, like, oh, I've seen 10,000 mistimed tackles in my life. I know which ones aren't yellow cards, which ones are, and which ones are reds, to a kind of majority consensus. And I just think if you had 100 football fans and you showed them that tackle live in the ground, 98 of them are going to go, that's a yellow card. It's a stick-on yellow card because he's late. Yep. He's kind of stopping a promising attack, but it, for me, doesn't bear any of the hallmarks of a red. You know, there's a little bit of force in it, but not huge. He's not off the ground. His studs aren't up, for me personally. And I was very, very surprised to see the red card come out. Les, give me your thoughts on this one, please.
I would have been in the two that thought it was a red immediately. So my immediate thought was, and again, two, I'm going to bring out two of the cliches here. My immediate thought was, one, you simply cannot go flying in like that, and two, you've given the referee a decision to make. So that was my immediate knee-jerk reaction, was the referee is within the realms of possibility to send him off for that. However, it's another of my pet peeves, and I saw this is something else Barry Robson picked up on in the post-match. It's one of these ones where the referee has come sprinting in and I think already has the red card out before he's even stopped moving. And the same thing happened when we had that, in fact, it was the Morton game last season when the penalty was awarded before anybody actually hit the deck, and Morton got a penalty very early on. It's the same thing. A referee has just not taken a moment to sort of reflect on and process what they've actually seen and what's happened. He's seen Josh Mullen sliding, he's seen Garrity go hitting the ground like a sack of tatties and then rolling around flapping the grass, and he's immediately concluded that is a red card. I think what changed it for me was before I'd even seen the highlights. You were then seeing Morton supporters on social media saying that wasn't a red. You had Grant Gillespie in the post-match saying that wasn't a red. And I thought, well, actually, when you've got that level of unanimity that it's not a red card, probably shows why I shouldn't be a referee and why, unless my name is Lloyd Wilson.
Robbie, give me your thoughts on this, please.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's really against Josh Mullen for me is the pace that he comes in at. But I'd agree with yourself, Duncan. I think it's a stick-on yellow card. I don't think that with it, that there's enough there to merit it being a red. I don't think you really came away from that thinking that Delaney was in any jeopardy or danger by it. Sure, he's left on the deck, but it wasn't one where you're thinking oh, that's potential leg breaker or anything. Not that is necessarily the criteria for being a red card. I completely agree with what Leslie's just said, though. I think that very much the decision the referee's automatically made in his head. He's seen it once and that was enough for him. He's gone straight to it and he's made his mind up. And ultimately, that was going to have a big ramification in terms of the game and the way that things would pan out. Whereas if he'd just taken a second just to rather than sprinting over, just go over, check on the player, and then dole out your punishment, then have a wee think and sort of say okay, was it fine? Just a very while it was rash from Josh Mullen, it was also very rash from the referee, equally as rash, shall we say, or probably more so. But I'm fully behind Blair and his justice for Josh campaign. We're all rooting for you, Josh, and hopefully we can get an appeal in and get that absolutely bodied out the way.
Yeah, I suspect we won't, to be honest. Just in the sense that, you can see the logic in it. I don't think any of us are saying I can't understand how the referees reached that decision. It's not one of these sort of unfathomable ones. It's just I think he's incorrect, and I think that I was kind of laying the seeds for this earlier. I think this is what happens when you're giving out these really cheap yellow cards early on. Because, if arguing about a throw-in is a yellow card, then, crashing into somebody at that pace kind of does feel worse than that. So, that maybe that should warrant a higher punishment. And I thought it was the same thing just throughout the game. I think there was one bad challenge in this game, and that was it. And instead of there being one yellow card, there were 8 yellow cards and 1 red card. And I just don't think that it was necessary.
There wasn't enough in that game to merit it, effectively.
No. I mean, I was looking at the other yellows. So the first one went to Kerr Robertson, the Morton player. I'm afraid I do not remember that at all. I don't remember I wasn't, chuckling away to myself thinking that's a very silly yellow card. I don't remember being kind of offended by it either. So I can't remember that, unfortunately. Paul McMillan was booked for dissent, as I talked about. Ross Matthews was booked not long after the goal. My kind of it's not in the highlights, but my recollection of this was that, again, it was a foul. But it was one of these ones where he's going in to make a challenge and he gets a bit of a nudge on the way in. So it's not that it's not a foul, but it's he's not managed to do what he's trying to do because he's been nudged by another player. So that doesn't change the fact that it's a foul. It's still a free kick to Morton. But if he's been sort of knocked off his balance as he's going in, what are you booking him for? He can't do anything about it. And it was in the middle of the park. It wasn't particularly kind of dangerous or anything. Jack Hamilton was booked for, I thought was soft at the time as well. He was kind of coming back and kind of through the back of a man to try and get the ball, and his foot was a little bit high. I don't know. Again, I think in another game where the referee hasn't already given out 4 or 5 yellows. I don't think that warrants one. He then books Scott Brown for holding on the ball in the immediate aftermath of that. Fine, okay, if you want. And but it's kind of that then sort of creates the circumstances for the red when you've given out 5 yellows already. Just, yeah, as I think it was an afternoon of sort of poor refereeing. We'll get on to the final referee talking point in a second. Just a couple more in this, but obviously there's a big one. After the goal, I think you kind of expect a bit of a fight back from Morton that never really materialised. They never really got a proper kind of grip on the game. There's a chance where it's across the back post. Grant Gillespie can only kind of header it right into Josh Ray at kind of point blank range. I don't know if it's possibly, if not for the kind of cushioning effect of his luscious fringe, maybe there's every chance that flies into the top corner. Not entirely sure. When they put Tommy Adeloy on, I had in the stand, I'd I'd forgotten about him. He's one of these guys who will just do nothing apart from the goals he scores.
Yeah.
And he scores the goals right in the middle of doing nothing. So you can kind of never forget about him and never write him off. But really, I mean, I think just about the only thing he does do in terms of really getting involved in this, I didn't really this didn't stand out to me at the time, but it's in the highlights. Again, it gets the slow-mo replay treatment. Callum Fordyce sort of sliding in at the feet of Tommy Adeloy inside the box. Robbie, you think there's anything in this penalty-wise?
Nah, I don't think so at all. I think that it was a good tackle, and then we get the ball hacked away. Adeloy kind of just tries to play on with it. Where after he's down, he tries to get the ball away out of his feet when he's lying on the ground. Nothing comes of it. I mean, you see sort of half-hearted appeals, but you're going to, if you're in Morton's position, you're going to be after anything and everything that's going. Just to take things back, though, just a sort of slight second, just a word for the defence in general, because I think that Barry Robson actually played it quite cute with the way that he managed things. A lot of people probably pointing at the sort of situation and sort of saying, oh, well, J. Rowe, why didn't he come on? He's the right back. I think Barry Robson's done really well in that he's just shifted Doherty out there. I think it's a very different, I was talking about this with Sean on Pine Bovril. It's a very different proposition playing against Fitzpatrick compared to Michael Garrity. And I think that Fitzpatrick, he's looking like he's really, really in solid form at the moment. Gave both Doherty and Mullen, to a degree, a very difficult afternoon last week. Got his goal, man of the match performance. Garrity's not the same as him, not the same level as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he's still a good player. Again, he can rock up in matches and do some damage, but I felt like it wasn't the right game to bring J. Rowe back in for me, and I think that he's done really well by just sticking to a 4. We brought Vaughan on, and Vaughan's sort of sitting deeper, and I think that just the performance and the resoluteness, we didn't have that in our team last season. I sort of said that at full time in Twitter. It was like this time last season, you look at the points total there compared to now, I think we had 3 points game against Thistle. Other than that, we weren't really getting out the traps. There seemed to be a lack of confidence. Whereas now, that's a very, very steely performance from the Rovers, and just did really well to sort of make sure that Morton didn't get too much momentum going into it. Albeit, I'm sure Morton fans will probably say the opposite. They felt that they were coming right back into it.
I think the immediate reaction whenever there's a red card, especially that late in the game when you're a goal up, is you look to the bench and see what's happening, what's going to change, who's coming on here. But actually, as you say, the players they still had in the park kind of made as much sense as any. So you drop into the 4 and then effectively you just sit 5 in front of them, really. And that's a really good point you make about the likes of Aidan Fitzpatrick. Players like that sort of offer enough kind of inspiration on their own that you're worried about them, whereas Morton had been so kind of huffing and puffing. It didn't feel wild You think, actually, we could probably just frustrate them for another 15 minutes here and we'll be fine. And specifically in relation to J. Rowe, I mean, really, to put him on, I think the only way you'd be doing that would be to stick to your back five. And you'd probably have to take Vaughan off again.
Yeah.
And he's only been in the park 10 minutes. And he's a really good player. And he's a guy who can get you a goal out of nothing. And to an earlier point, he's a guy that Morton have to worry about. So in the sense that, yeah, it's not ideal that you're asking Lewis Vaughan to play effectively as a right-sided midfielder and do a lot of defending, I don't think it was warranted, and ultimately the result bears it out. It wasn't warranted to kind of panic yourself into putting J. Rowe on. Going to the 4 was perfectly fine.
And you're not wanting to take off any of your midfielders because Brown, Byrne and Matthews all had really good games.
That's
particularly when you consider Cammy Blues was anonymous yesterday. The boy Robertson did well enough, but never really impacted the game in the same way that our midfield did. Like when the ball was coming into the midfield areas, but we're still for all there was a talk about going direct yesterday. I feel like we had a really solid performance in terms of midfield and the contribution that they made. Just again, it's across the pitch. It wasn't pretty, but we got the job done.
Yeah, Dougie Imrie in his post-match basically. It wasn't wild. He wasn't going over the score, but the criticism that he did have was for his own wide players, and you can see why, because they were getting no joy through the middle, and it was very kind of obvious that they weren't in that way that you'd think. I imagine very early on he was thinking, right, well, if we're going to get something, it's going to come through these wide players, and Owen Moffat in particular, just nothing. Absolutely nothing at all. Garrity comes on for him. Garrity looked better, but still not a huge amount going on there. Right, let's get to the other big talking point. We're doing well to get this much time out of this game. So, Morton have a goal disallowed. Jackson Longridge heading into the back post from a corner, but by all accounts, it was the linesman who's on the kind of same side as the Raith TV camera. He draws the referee's attention to Josh Ray, who, as the ball comes in, is sort of inside his own goal, having found his way there somehow, which is very much the contentious point, I think. Les, what do you think about this? Where do you fall down on the whole, is there a foul, is there not, debate?
I've watched it back a number of times, and I am still not 100% convinced either way. There's clearly some contact. Now, this is not Spain, it's not La Liga, it's not the J-League in Japan. Some jostling, some physicality, and some contact with goalkeepers. It's not the NBA. Some contact with goalkeepers is allowed in Scotland and to be expected. Is that what causes Josh Ray to fall over, or does he slip and get lucky? I'm not sure. However, there is another confounding factor, which is that when the ball comes in, there is somebody from a still I saw who is in an offside position. So I don't know whether that's also been spotted as well, and whether that also feeds into it too. I think if that had been gone against us and we hadn't won, I would have been a bit grumpy. Having said that, we did have Jack Hamilton's ghost goal last season too, which happened in very similar circumstances, where it actually did cross the line and the music played and it was then chalked off. So these things happen. So I'm still not convinced, I have to say, either way. I think across the piece, though, there's enough going on there that something has been spotted. And again, also, the other thing is that you haven't said quick decisions were bad. The decision was made quite quickly. There wasn't a lot of discussion. There wasn't both the assistants involved. There wasn't, I think you'd said, Robbie, in the group chat, you didn't have the linesman running back to the centre circle, which you would get if they'd thought there was a goal. So that kind of bit of their sort of body language does kind of lend me to think that they had seen something that warranted it being chalked off.
Yeah, the offside point is interesting. I mean, partly, I suppose, it renders the entire discussion moot, but it's like 40% of the content of this episode, so let's keep talking about it anyway. By all accounts, the offside wasn't part of the decision making. I don't think anyone's kind of saying it. Seems like very much, mostly in Grant Gillespie's interview, he's saying that it's the linesman who gives it, and he's giving it for a foul. Robbie, do you agree with the linesman? Do you think there is a foul here?
Yes, I do. But then I'm a Raith Rovers fan, and to be honest, I just find it funny that Morton fans have a bee in their bonnet about these things, and they are talking about all the refereeing decisions going against them. Lads, I hate to say it, but this is Scottish football, and the referees are absolute. Well, they're trying their hardest. They're absolute gubbins. They are just not going to give you anything. It's not some grand conspiracy against Greenock Morton Football Club. No one likes us. We don't care. Apparently, going to the wayside here. To go further on Leslie's comment about Jack Hamilton's ghost goal last season, very valid point. I would also refer to April 2025 when we didn't get a penalty in the last minute against Morton, where they were quite happy to not comment on that one. And as well, I would also refer to October 2022 with Jake Katongo.
3 years.
Exactly. But Jai Katongo diving in the box, Grant Gillespie sinks the penalty, ironically enough, to pull it back. Look, if you go back further enough, my point is that if you go back far enough, you will find contentious decisions from referees going for or against you either way. Morton fans still go on about the Lewis Vaughan penalty back in 2023. The officials are just daft. It's just
daft.
You're
trying very hard not to say that this is an outrageous decision. I think that is terrible. That's just not a foul. There's not a foul in there.
Exactly.
I think when you go through it, like, yeah, Grant Gillespie's kind of nudging Jack Hamilton, and Jack Hamilton then sort of nudges into Josh Ray, but he slips. And it's one of the, when I was looking back at it, what I was keen to see was, like, at what point does it all take place? Because it's one where, see if that happens before the referee's blown his whistle, or sort of like as the kick is being taken, I think you would stop that and retake it. I think you'd be like, oh, hang on a second, no, the goalkeeper slipped. This isn't sort of fair, effectively. You can't have a goalkeeper slipping before it's been taken. Take it again. But it's very much the ball is in the air. But there's no... Like, Gillespie's just holding his ground as much as anything. And he's not even challenging the goalkeeper. He makes no contact with the goalkeeper at any time. He makes some contact with Jack Hamilton, who slightly makes contact with Josh Ray, who then just slips. But there's not a foul in there. There's no, like, to Les's point about the NBA and all this other kind of stuff, there's just nowhere near enough in that to be a foul.
I mean, saying it was on Ray itself, I mean, I think you would really need to be speaking to the linesman or the referee. I think Les has probably nailed it, and there's contentious, shall we say, to say the least.
Yeah.
In terms of, I think we don't really know what the logic was with it, because they're never going to come out and sort of say, it was this player on this player. Like, it's naturally you point immediately to Josh Ray slipping, and you say, that was the point. We don't know that, so...
Well, I think, so my best guess on that would be that it's just sort of assistant referee muscle memory, almost, where if a corner's being taken, there's a load of bodies in the middle, and the goalkeeper suddenly falls back into the goal. Somebody's probably shoved him. And we know that goalkeepers are a protected species, and that's kind of the way these things go. And 99 times out of 100, if the goalkeeper tumbles back into his goal, he probably has been shoved in there by someone else who doesn't play for his team. And it just, you can see sort of before it's taken, the ref's kind of looking at them, and he's looking at Gillespie, who's kind of moving himself about a little bit. And then, 4 seconds later, Ray falls back into the goal. Again, a little bit like the red card. I don't think it's difficult to say what does he think he's seen or whatever it is, but ultimately, I don't think it actually bears out in the reality. I think what's happened is he's slipped. And it's incredibly unfortunate. or rather, it would be incredibly unfortunate to concede a goal in that manner. And it's very fortunate for us that the referees decide to do it. And I mean, ultimately, you talk about things levelling themselves out over the course of a season. Is a red card 15 minutes from time equal to a disallowed goal 5 minutes from time? Probably not, but they're working against one another effectively. It's it makes it very easy to just chalk it all up to refereeing incompetence rather than anything more kind of sinister than that. But I mean, that's, as I say, my main kind of takeaway from this is I don't think it's a red card. I do think that's a goal. And so in terms of the big decisions in the game, I just think the referees got them wrong. And it was a lot of the smaller decisions I think he got wrong as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of the kind of final 5 minutes, plus a couple of minutes of injury time after that, I think Morton, again, will be very disappointed in sort of what they managed to create. I mean, really, you get that, the goal itself, the disallowed goal from the corner. There's a couple of other headers. We mentioned the Gillespie one. There's a header that kind of loops wide. There's a low cross that I think it's Garrity again zips in, that Josh Ray smothers. There's just nothing else. There's no again, talk about, you've got Adeloy on the park and you're not creating kind of anything at all. And again, Robbie, to your point, a lot of that is credit to the defence, credit to the way that the Rovers set up. And the last kind of 5 minutes in particular really was characterised by the Rovers just working so hard in that midfield as much as anything. Really, in what was effectively a 5-man midfield, including Hamilton and Vaughan, so that all Morton could do was really kind of try and work it wide and see what they could get. But yeah, as I say, they'll be very disappointed that they didn't create anything else. Because you think, you disallowed goal 5 minutes from time, you take that in the chin, think, we're going to get one more chance. They just didn't really. I think that's about it, really, in terms of that game. There's just not a huge amount there.
It's been the last injury time, the last 5 minutes of injury time, certainly after the disallowed goal. I mean, a bit before as well. How much of the time the ball spent actually down at Morton's end? And just going back to what Robbie was saying before, that again is credit to maybe some of the tactical decisions we made. Because we weren't doing what John McGlynn would have done, which, as I say, is putting on more and more defenders. Jack Hamilton, who was on a yellow card, so was limited in the amount of bullying and jostling and hustling he could do, and Louis Vaughan, between them, did a great job of keeping the ball and getting the ball down to Morton's end. And that takes the pressure off as well. So I think there's something to be said for that as well, because it did help us to see the game out. It gave us spells of a minute and 30 seconds here and there where there wasn't the pressure on the defence because we were trying to work the ball down into the corner, or we had it out down for a throw in at the Morton end or whatever. So that was another wise part, I think, of that decision, not to bring somebody else on who's more defensively minded.
It's eternally frustrating, should I say, when you're the team that's on the receiving end of that, when you're watching your players and they just can't get the ball off some nippy wee forward, a Lewis Vaughan type, or a big Jack Hamilton that's holding them off left, right and centre. So it's nice to be the Jimmy Rustlers for a change, shall we say.
Just one kind of final question on this then. So both Dougie Imrie and Grant Gillespie said almost exactly the same sort of phrasing when they were talking about it. What they said from a Morton perspective was, we didn't do enough to win the game, but I don't think we deserve to lose it either. Robbie, would you sort of agree with that overall point in the sense that a draw would have been a fairer reflection on the game?
I don't know. I'm not too concerned about it. We ultimately were the ones that had the clear-cut chance from open play, and we've scored it, we've taken it, and that's the reality of the situation. I think, again, when you come down to the points, like without wanting to revisit old ground, we're talking about the Josh Mullen one where the referee has one take and he sees it and he's made a decision, and it's exactly the same with the corner. So you've got to apply that to every situation. They don't have the replays, they don't have VAR. it's just the nature of the beast. We've all got to play with it, and that's just came out the way that it has. Ultimately, we've got the job done. It was a good, resolute display across the piece. What I would also point to is the fact that when you compare, we've played away at Ayr United and down at Capello now, compared to last season. We only took 1 point from the 4 games last season. This season, we're already 5 points ahead of that, and we've still got 2 games to play. These are exactly the types of games that can potentially take you from being a team that's in and about the playoffs, or the top 2 in the league, or you're going to be down 6th, 7th position. So fingers crossed that continue. Obviously, got some very, very big games coming up on the horizon, St Johnstone and Arbroath, and then we a trip up to Dingwall, I think, or Airdrie after that. So, yeah, it's while the performance wasn't exactly inspired in a sense of like free-flowing attacking football, Barry Robson says that in his interview. He's like, I'm not going to watch that game back. But at the same time, it's points on the board, and it's more than we were doing last season. So that's all you can ask, as far as I'm concerned. It would be great if we could have gone down there and bodied them, but the reality was that pitch. I know that it's been mentioned by Dougie Imrie, what they just, and it's not a fault of Morton. They can only afford what they can afford. It's the same for any club at this level. You can only work with the resources that you've got. But that pitch was very, very sticky. We played the occasion and we walked away with the 3 points and we went up the road. And that's as good as you're going to get on a day like yesterday, particularly when you look at some of the games that we've had more recently, where we've arguably played better against Morton and we came away with draws, if not defeats.
And Les, if we think back to last week as well, obviously with the 3-2 defeat at Thistle, and I think we felt a little bit hard done by it. It felt like maybe that was a slightly unfair reflection on the game. How do you reflect on those 2 games as a whole, as an overview, looking back at them both now?
I think the thing that kind of heartens me most compared to last season is not only that we're scoring goals, but that we are scoring goals from open play. So the start of last season was atrocious. And if I remember, I'll probably misremember this, but we did get close to October before we'd scored more than 1 or 2 goals from open play. It might even have been that 2-0 game with Ayr. You know, we got very far into the season without doing anything other than occasionally scoring penalties. The fact that we're actually, even for games like Partick game where we didn't win, we did score a goal from open play, and we were getting the ball in the box enough to get chances. I mean that's another thing as well about penalties. So supporters of other teams might have a point when they talk about the number of penalties we have, because we do get a lot, but the reason we're getting them is because we have the ball in the box, and somebody like Dylan Easton, it can be quite hard to get the ball off him without fouling him. So but we're creating a lot more chances. It's also when we've got the option that I think at some point we are probably going to have to mix things up. I think what we're doing is great. It could become a bit predictable, but we've got the options to do that, not just going forward as well. So we've got a Ewan Wilson who's available now. We've got Darragh O'Connor, Jay Rowe, and yet it might be that we have a game. Like last season, there were games where we took Lewis Stevenson out and put Liam Dick in, particularly against Livy, where you just need that bit of height. So, we've got the option to do things slightly differently defensively. Going forward, we're actually scoring more. And I think what absolutely did for us last season was how badly we started. We made an excellent finish to the season and were a goal basically away from making the playoffs. We were probably until January, February time in serious danger of being in the relegation playoff. And so that's and a lot of that could be traced back to the first quarter, the first third of the season. So to be 5 games in and to already have 10 points under our belt, that is way ahead of where we were last season. It gives you a lot more latitude later in the season that you're not constantly having to play catch up for a bad start. So I'm very, very encouraged by what I've seen so far, and I think it's given us a good foundation to work on for the rest of the season.
Definitely, and I think that's a nice note to end on for this evening as well. So We will be back later in the week to look ahead to St Johnstone's visit to Starks Park. Top of the table clash, although it really should be a triple threat with Arbroath involved as well. But that's one where the Rovers will be looking to get revenge for their the League Cup group stage defeat. And Robbie, I think you've got something a little bit special, something a little bit different lined up for this week as well.
Yeah, tomorrow night I'm going to have a chat with John Greenock, who was a journalist at the 5-3 Press from 1992 through 1995. And actually, it's 30th anniversary of our European adventure. So I'm going to be asking him various questions with regards to that. So if you do have any questions and you're listening to this on the Sunday evening / Monday, post this Morton game, then feel free to chuck them into the comments section and I will grill John regarding those. Really looking forward to that. I think it should be an interesting chat.
Definitely one of Scotland's foremost sports writers. Should be really good. I'm looking forward to listening to it. Thank you everybody for listening to us tonight. Not anybody's foremost anything, but we will always get together to talk about the Rovers when we get the opportunity. And as I say, you'll get Robbie and John at some point, and then we'll be back on our regular programming, presumably Wednesday night, Thursday night, and we'll speak to you again then. Thank you. Goodbye.